person needs to first actually start to recognize that those moments in their life that they truly felt okay inside. And that comes in different ways. It could be that we feel a sense of self-love. It could be that we felt very connected to people and to others, very present. It could be that we had an incredible amount of clarity. It could be that we had an incredible amount of optimism. Life looked beautiful, or optimistic, or perspective. So there's different ways in which this kind of okayness manifests for people at different times. But if we can think back to those moments, and if we can really deeply think into why they occurred for us, because often at the times when they're happening, we misattributing it. So we're saying, oh, it's because I was in a great school or something, or I had lots of friends, or it was because I was on holiday, or in, that kind of environment, or it's because this happened to me. So that's the misattribution. We're not owning it. We're not claiming it. We're not claiming that power and saying that was us.
Hey, I'm Esther, and you are listening to On Your Own, a podcast for Jewish girls living away from home. Each week, we bring you an inspiring person or message to help you confidently navigate life on your own so you can achieve real growth and independence and take ownership of this foundational stage of your life. For additional resources, tips, and to stay up to date on future episodes, sign up for the On Your Own newsletter, linked below in the description. Looking forward to spending some time with you today. And now, to this week's episode. If you can tell me, what are the points in your life, the important points that are necessary to know, to get to know the person that is sitting in front of me today, and what has led to you being the person that you are today?
Oh, wow. Okay, that's a great question. So I would definitely say I was actually speaking to two of my sons, actually three of them, on Shabbos yesterday, my 22, my 21-year-old, and my 13-year-old, and telling them that often in life, you look back at the things that you wish you had never gone through at a certain time. Like while you're going through them, they are so immensely difficult, and you feel like my life would be so different if they weren't here. But once you've gone through them and you've learned the lessons that they were there to gift you, you often look back on them and you think, thank God I went through them, because you see that they were the things that cultivated you into the person that you are now. So for sure, parts of my upbringing that I struggled. And, most humans, there are definitely humans who don't struggle and have a wonderful childhood and early teens, but a lot do struggle. And whether those struggles were family struggles, because most families have their dysfunction to some degree, um, or and feeling like you're not getting what you need from the people that you think should be providing that to you. But at the end of the day, when you don't get what you need from others, be that your peers, be that the outside world, be that your parents to a degree, you have to look inside to find that within you. So much about my journey to who I am today has been having to look into my own internal world to find the self-worth and the validation and the love and the compassion and the things that I always felt that life needed to give me. So for sure, there were, and if you want specific moments, there were many moments. Like I remember when I was 18 and I wasn't chosen to be head girl of my high school. And my entire kind of childhood was about creating this version of Terry that would be so incredible to the outside world that they would just want me and accept me and love me and say you're the best. And so much was about creating that version. And so when that version was rejected by the high school that I was at, and not only was I not made head girl, I wasn't even made deputy head or one of the 30 prefects.
Wow.
And there were reasons, because they could see I was struggling, even though externally I looked like I was doing well and academically, and they knew I was struggling on the inside there. I had a lot of issues that I thought were invisible, but weren't as invisible as I thought. And I fell apart, like literally fell apart. From that incident, I self-harmed very badly, cut my wrists, and those were the days where self-harm wasn't something that was common or in trend. I'd never heard of it. It was just a reaction to the immense pain I was feeling. And the next day, my parents, who were so sweet and so clueless, because these things weren't spoken about, this was in the early 90s, they kind of just bandaged up these wrists because I'd literally hit arteries and bandaged them up with massive bandages and just sent me back to school.
The
And I
next
was like,
day.
yeah, and I was so embarrassed and so mortified and told people that I fell and kind of stuffed myself with my wrist. I landed up leaving school, which was actually really good because it was my final year of school, because it wasn't a school which was where I was thriving or felt like I could be myself. So it was a good move. But those kind of incidences, and there were quite a lot of them in my childhood and my teenagehood, which felt very dramatic and very traumatic, um, landed up to be real catalysts for healing for me and for evolving as a person, and those carried on into my early 20s, um, different kinds of struggle. And and I would say probably the most transformative moment was when I was 29 and I had five small children. And I had been going through. I had five small children under the age of seven, I should say, all boys, very very
Oh,
sweet
wow.
boys. And I had like immigrated three different times. I'd moved from South Africa to Israel, back to London, then back to Israel, then back to London. I didn't have a great support system. My babies were very difficult. They all cried until they were 2 years old, and I just had a moment where it all got too much for me, and I took a major overdose, and I landed up in hospital in a coma. And coming out of hospital and coming home, something happened, which was a real gift. For like 6 weeks after I returned home, something just shifted, and I felt almost like I was shrouded by this kind of blanket of calm and of peace and of inner love. And I felt for the first time in as long as I can remember, although I'm sure there were pockets or moments of this, an immense self love for myself and for others. My mind felt crystal clear. I felt hopeful. Life looked beautiful. And this kind of continued for, I would say, around, I don't know, 6 to 8 weeks. It was a long time ago now. And then all the kind of dark thinking that I'd been grappling with came back. But it was almost like this was a North Star, because it kind of showed me that there was something within me. Because the reason why this was so transformative was because in Terry's world, and I think in most humans' worlds, we think that in order to experience that kind of peace, that kind of feeling of inner okayness, a lot of things have to change in our outside world. And then I was convinced that unless I kind of fixed my past and kind of sorted out my future and changed the country I was living in and got more support and changed and fixed a lot of things about myself, my personality, my weight, my all the things I was unhappy with, I couldn't feel that level of peace. But yet I felt it in those weeks. And it confused me, but it also intrigued me. And it almost became like a holy grail to see, well, could I find more of that? If that was within me and if I'd felt it in those 6 weeks, what covered it up and how could I uncover it again? It was almost like I sensed, even though I couldn't articulate it at the time, that I touched my essence. I touched a deeper part of me that had been really covered for a long time. And so I went on a quest for like 6 months to try and see if I could rediscover this, and find out, was it within me? And if it was, why did it get so covered up and so hidden? And that was part of a significant part of the journey that led me to the work that I've done for the last 2 decades. So, because after those 6 months, I did find out a lot about it, which we can talk about, and which led me to the work that I do today. So it was often, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, that it's often in those darkest, there's a quote that I once heard: when it's dark enough, you can see the stars. And sometimes in those darkest moments, it's when there's some part of us that is eternal and infinite, and not finite, that almost comes to life or awakens. Everything else disintegrates, and something within us is able to build or create something new, and something more solid and more stable than was before. And that's kind of
Mm.
been my experience.
Wow. What I'm thinking of is that you were 29 when this happened. I'm not 29 yet. And
Yeah.
it's a long time of suffering. It's a long time of grappling with these moments that you were mentioning briefly, to be able to get to that moment where you can start to maybe see the light or get some sort of direction.
Mhm.
That 29 years, and it's a long time. Like, can you take us back to before that moment in those 25, in those 29 years? I know there's obviously a lot, but you said that in the moment, it's like, how am I gonna get out of this? It's the worst thing ever. And then looking back, you realize what a gift it was. But when you're in those moments, can you describe a bit of what that felt like for you? What was that experience before that, like, overdose that happened at 29 and then that 6 week period?
Well, first of all, I would say that that it wasn't 29 years of suffering.
Mm,
It was ups and downs, you know. So there was a lot of good times, and there was a lot of, you know, and that was actually what, after that moment, what gave me almost the impetus to know that I have felt what I called the health in Terry at various parts of my life, where I felt fine and I felt comfortable in my
mm,
skin. I've had so many moments of those, and then they seem to be taken away. And I guess what bothered me about life was the instability, was
mm,
that it felt very unpredictable life. I think this is one of the things that was one of my powerful learnings. I often say that it felt like the world had all the power and I had little. So it felt like things would happen in life that would take away, they were too big for me. It felt like I lacked what I needed to handle, and I never knew what life would throw at me. So it felt like I was moving along in life, and it didn't matter what age. It could be at age 6 when I first went to grade 1 in school in South Africa, and I wanted to be such a little girl, and I put up my hand and gave the wrong answer. And in those days, the teachers were very strict. And I remember my first grade teacher came and smacked me on my hand with a ruler. And I was mortified and so embarrassed. And from that day on, promised myself I would never speak up in class again, you know, and it became so difficult for me to speak up in class. So there were these, you never knew what life was going to kind of throw at you. It felt so predictable, and so I felt so out of control, and so I was working so hard in my mind a lot of the time to try and manage life. That's how it felt to me. But there were many moments in my childhood and young adulthood where I had a great time and was with friends and with family, or just felt good. So I don't want to give the impression that it was just 29 years of suffering, because it wasn't. But I did have this tendency, as a lot of people do, but to have very extreme kind of ups and downs as well. So it wasn't that when life was hard, it wasn't just hard, it was, I was depressed and I was down and I was writing poetry and I was listening to crazy music, heavy poetic music and poetry about. So I really felt things. I was a very deep feeler. So I felt things very deeply. So when I was in those moments, it's almost like they sucked me in and there was nothing outside of them. You know, what I noticed, and this is what I noticed when I started to come out of, you know, my depression, one of my depressions at the age of 29, which I spoke about, was I noticed that other people did go through difficult times, but it seemed to be lighter for them. They seemed to have more perspective. They seemed to have more resilience. So they could kind of go through them and say, yeah, this is a difficult time for me, but they could speak about it with perspective. When for me, there was no perspective. It was as if it became me and I was it. I couldn't separate
mm.
myself from my experience. It was like I was my experience. So it was so all consuming, and it almost just like sucked me into this vortex. So that's why I think it felt so
Wow.
extreme.
Thank you for clarifying that. Not 29 years of suffering. Sorry that I
No,
I appreciate that. What I'm hearing is that your experience was very defined by what was going on outside. Is that what how you would say? Like, if things
yeah,
were going well outside, you were okay, but when things went wrong, it affected you incredibly deeply. And so you were trying to keep things okay by, I
yeah,
guess, becoming head girl. Were there other ways that you were trying to keep things okay because you knew that if they weren't okay, it was really
yeah.
bad for you?
Well, and it wasn't only if things were going wrong, because there was so much anxiety and work around making sure that they stayed right. So, for example, if you wanted, one of what I call the outsources or attachments I had was to people liking and appreciating me, which is a common one for many, many humans and young people, is that we feel that if people like us, then we feel good about ourselves, a sense of self-worth. And if they don't like us or aren't happy with us, we feel like it almost strips or takes away what I call our self-worth or our innate well-being. And so I was working really hard to make sure that the people around me were happy with me. So that meant that I needed to be a top student. I needed to make sure that I was getting excellent results. So I was overworking all the time. I got
Mm.
very anxious around exams. I would wake up at 2 in the morning. I would learn all my work off by heart. Like I knew I could say it without looking at it, word for word, every essay in my history syllabus, etc. If I didn't get a good mark, then of course there would be a repercussion. And a good didn't get a good mark could even mean an A minus for me or a B. That would be a disaster. And and that was very, very innocently supported by my family. My parents also, if I got a B, then in the holidays I would be having to do extra work. And they were good people, but they'd also bought into this almost societal kind of narrative that we need to be the best, and this is the measure of success. And to be a successful parent, you had a successful child, who did well in school. I was obsessed with my appearance. I wanted to be prettier. I wanted to be thinner. From a very young age, I struggled with food. Food was comfort for me, for these strong feelings I had. It was an emotional comfort. I would steal food. I would binge. I would starve. I was in those cycles from a very young age. And in my teens, I had um, anorexia, very bad anorexia, and also bulimia. And again, that was to try and be, I was in a very competitive school. And the thinner, the prettier you were, the more you stood out, the more you were noticed. And that was another way in which another kind of unhealthy kind of coping mechanism that I picked up. And another one was just overthinking. My mind was always overthinking, because when you don't feel safe, when the world doesn't feel safe, when you don't feel safe inside, secure inside, your mind, our minds are, what I learned later in life is our minds are our best friends. They're always trying to protect us. So if the mind doesn't feel that you're safe, it's going to be overworking, trying to make sure that you're safe. It's always, always active, and it won't rest unless it thinks you're safe. So because my mind didn't feel safe, felt like there were so many potential threats to my self-worth, I was always, always on and working really, really hard. And as we know, the more you think, the more you feel. You live in the feeling of thinking. So that was a lot of kind of the emotional discomfort that I felt at times.
Mm. So it wasn't only when things were outwardly uh, doing badly, but it was that trying to keep things predictable to avoid that caused suffering in and of itself.
Yeah, yeah. And that's
Wow.
for sure, for something for sure true for humans. That
Yeah,
even
I
when
identify with
things
that.
look okay on the outside, working really hard on the inside to make sure that nothing goes wrong. There's a lot, for example, people who need people to like them in order to feel okay. There's a lot of thinking about what you said. Did I say something wrong? Do you think they're upset with me? What should I say? Thinking about their reactions, managing other people to make sure that they're happy with you. That's a lot of thinking on a person's mind, you know?
Yeah,
So
I guess that's
creating,
what we would call social anxiety today, if you would like tap a label on it.
yeah, social
Yeah.
anxiety. You can also call it people pleasing. That it
Mm.
comes across also as people pleasing. Yeah,
Wow.
for sure.
And the appearance one I identify with a lot. I
Yeah.
wasn't able to put words to it the way that you did. Look, when I left home, I became obsessed as well, obsessed with being skinny and with what I ate. And now looking back, then I didn't know why, but looking back, it was just I wanted to keep things predictable. If I can weigh the same and look the same and eat the same, and I could have a sense of control over this really unpredictable world that I'd been thrown into when leaving home.
Yeah.
So I see that as well. And with grades as well. I remember that I once got like a 94, and I went up and I told my friend that my teacher had made a mistake and I had actually gotten another answer correct. And she told me, if you go up to the teacher to correct her, I'm never speaking to you again. You got a 94. I
What's wrong
still,
with you?
she
Yeah.
was like, what is wrong with me? But I had to go and tell the teacher
That's
and get the higher
6%.
grade.
Yeah, that's
And
6%. Yeah. But that's what the man does. The man often has this propensity, it's almost compelled to look at what's wrong. I always said,
Mm,
if you go into a room, it'll look to the dirty little kind of the dust in the corners of the room. A man will often go to that and it'll miss everything that we have. It's something that it was one of the insights, many insights that I've had along the way, is to really appreciate the goodness, because and almost it's a retraining of the mind to kind of see what's good in life, because the mind misses those moments because it's always looking to what's lacking, what's missing.
right. You used the word before, inner okayness, and I love that. I think that that sums up what we're all looking for, especially when we leave and we just want to be okay, like
Yeah.
inside, even if things are going well on the outside or if they aren't. So, what did you learn about this inner okayness? How do we access it even when life is so unpredictable and when there is suffering? How can
Yes.
we have that inner okayness?
So maybe I'll start off by giving you a metaphor that I like to share, which is about, when we're little, we have a comforter. We have like a blanket or a teddy
A
bear
blankie.
or something, that kind of makes us feel secure. It makes us feel okay like we can conquer the world. I've got quite a few grandchildren now, and they've all got their blankies and their snugglies and their dummies and their thumbs and their comforters. So the question we want to ask ourselves is, when that child is clutching their teddy bear or their blanket and they're feeling that sense of inner okayness, is the teddy bear giving it to them? Because the teddy bear is just an inanimate object that's stuffed with stuffing and put glass beady eyes on. The blanket is just a piece of material. So how can those inanimate objects be giving them a deep sense of okayment or security or
Mm.
comfort? And it's not coming. You see, the child's misattributing it to the comforter, but what they're really feeling is their own innate sense of okayness. Because as humans, we're born with what I call innate well-being. We're born with security and comfort and resources, and by resources, all the resources we need for life. And by that I mean deeper feelings such as peace and self-love, and a feeling of natural confidence, and feeling that we're good enough, a feeling of what I call shlemus, or wholeness. We're born with those deeper feelings, and we're born also with the ability to have clarity of mind, to know what to do in each moment. It's almost a wisdom that's tailor-made for our lives. We're born with the ability to be flexible, to be agile, to connect, to love. All these incredible human resources are intrinsic in our soul, in our neshama, in our psyche. They're there. They're almost the foundation of who we are as people. They're what I'd call our true essence, or our true selves. And when a child is hugging their teddy bear, they're feeling their true essence, which is an inner feeling of deep okayness. Nothing's missing. The soul is infinite. It is not lacking anything. It is whole already. It doesn't need any add-ons or any fixing. It's already whole, and they're feeling it. They're feeling that sense of inner okayness, but they're misattributing it to the teddy bear. And then what happens is that as we grow older, we leave our teddy bears and comforters behind, at least to some extent. But what we do is we then find what I call adult teddy bears, things that we now believe can give us a sense of inner okayness or take it away from us. Because when a child doesn't have their teddy bear, they feel bereft. And and in the resilience framework that we've constructed over 2 decades, we've identified 7 what I'd call main attachments that human beings, or adult teddy bears, believe wrongly or falsely, but understandably believe that our inner well-being or our inner okayness is dependent on or conditional on. And those are people appreciating or liking us. So we feel that when people are appreciating and liking us, we're fitting in, we feel that we belong. Then we can feel okay. We can feel a sense of inner okayness. But when we don't, we feel like it sucks that away from us. So we've almost given the power away to this teddy bear. We've misattributed something that's innate and intrinsic in us, and we believe that people appreciating us has the power to give us a sense of okayness or take it away. Another one is getting things right. We think that when we get things right, then we can feel a sense of inner okayness. And when we don't, it feels like it sucks or takes away that sense of inner okayness.
Like
And
getting good grades? What would getting things
getting things right can happen in all different ways. It's almost that perfectionist streak. I get things
mm,
right. Someone's happy with me, and that can be good grades. That can be yourself as a mother. That can be yourself as a friend. That can be yourself as a student. That can be yourself as a, as a daughter, as a, you did something which somebody's happy with, and so you got something right. You did it to whatever standard that you have in your mind that is the ultimate standard.
so
So
perfectionism, getting
yeah,
things
yeah,
perfect.
yeah, getting things
Mm,
right and perfect. That's a big, big one. And
yeah.
then there's ones like financial security, which might not be, I'm not sure if it's as pertinent to your kind of demographic, but as others, but it's for sure a big one. Another one is physical health, which is a huge one for people, and can put a lot of thinking on their minds. Another one is our loved ones being okay. We feel that we can
Mm.
only be okay when our loved ones are okay. When our loved ones aren't okay, then we can't be okay. So that's another big one
Like
that we
the
believe.
empath kind of
Mm-hmm.
being like an empath.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm,
And we can talk loads about that. That's a huge one, specifically one parents struggle with, but many, many people
yes.
struggle with. And then there's also people behaving in a particular way. That we can only be okay when a person's behaving in a way that we like them to behave. So, for example, it might be that you need a friend to be sensitive to your needs, and to ask you how you are. And if they're not, then it feels like it sucks or takes away your sense of okayness. You can't feel okay or peaceful or, good enough. It could be that if you have a husband or a partner, you need them to respect you or to do 50% of the work, whatever it is in the house. There's
The
there's a whole
roles,
there's a
playing the
whole kind of
roles.
yeah, so there's a whole way that, and we've made this up, it's individual for each of us, that we believe that maybe we believe people should be reasonable, or people should be moral, or people should be sensitive, or whatever it is. And when they're not that way, it feels like it takes away our sense of intrinsic okayness. Um, I'm trying to think if I've left any others out. Maybe I feel like I've left one out, but I'm not sure if that's all seven. But basically, those are kind of the main seven, and those preoccupy our minds because when we give something power and feels that it has power over us, our minds are going to spend a lot of time making sure, are people liking us? Are we getting it right? Is my friend okay? Is all these things, and all that thinking is really what covers our natural feeling of okayness that is within us. Those deeper feelings I was talking about that I felt are covered by all the thinking that we're doing all the time. The metaphor I like to give is that our deep sense of okayness or intrinsic well-being is like the sun. It's always there. The sun doesn't go away. It looks like it goes away, but it's a constant. It's always in the sky. It doesn't move. But it gets covered by clouds such that we can't feel its characteristics, its light, its warmth, its energy. And the same is true with our intrinsic okayness. It's always within us, but it gets covered by this insecure thinking that are actually a result of these attachments, what I call these, what we've attached our sense of okayness to. They're the root causes. They create all this kind of insecure thinking. And it's that thinking and all the feeling that goes with that thinking that kind of covers our, and our kind of takes away us being able to experience this feeling of okayness, which is kind of a constant and always there, but we don't always get to feel it, you know?
So why, when we're babies and very young, do we feel that? I'm thinking of my kids' pacifiers. They don't really have teddy bears, but they have what we call dummies. And oh my gosh, the amount of times I have been frantically looking for a dummy because they
Yeah,
will not be okay until I find it. And then I'm
yeah,
not okay until I find it. It's almost like I need it too.
yeah, yeah,
Why do they need that to get calm? If you're saying
yeah,
that we have this in us, we see already from babies that they need these external things to calm
yeah.
them down.
These developmental stages in young children where a child comes into this world and they don't really have a sense of separation or sense of self, from the other. So it's almost like what they learn through the mother or through the caregivers, their main caregivers, is they're learning about themselves. And so the mother actually is the child's security, is the child's sense of love, boundaries, or sense of security in the world. And that's what the child is learning. They're almost mirroring something that's within them, but they have to learn it through the other. And
Mm.
so and the parent or the giver is essential for the child's, kind of well-being. The child would perish, the child would cease to live if they didn't have someone caring for them. But what happens is that those objects, those transitional objects, are actually quite important because they become almost a bridge from the parent to an object. But then what it's supposed to be is to the self. And often that doesn't happen in the way that it should. So it should be that it's a transitional kind of process where it's from the parent is the security to the object to, and then the child finds it within themselves. That's the transition. That's a healthy transition. But it's one that is quite confusing for us, especially in the society we live in, because we all do grow up in a society which has been influenced by secular values, which is that your self-worth is dependent on how you look and how successful you are and your status. That's another one I left out, which is achievement, status, and progress. That's
That's a
another
big one.
attachment. It's a huge one, which
Yeah.
goes to the what we were talking about, the marks and how well you're perceived, and and how you're showing up in life and your success. So that's kind of what society is constantly telling us, and it does seem that way. It does seem that way. That it's almost, it's kind of counterintuitive to see that what we're looking for on the outside is already inside us. It's you've got to look deeper than what kind of meets the eye. It's just like I often say, when you look, it does look like the sun is moving around the earth, it's rising and setting. It does look like the earth is flat. It looks very flat to me when I look out the window. To see deep truths in life, psychological truths, spiritual truths, scientific truths, we have to look deeper as human beings. And oftentimes we don't do that. Sometimes life forces us to do that. And then we actually see, oh, that looked to be true. I've actually been believing that my whole life, but it's not true.
So there is a period of time where we are dependent on the other, and that's normal, like for our well-being, because a child will not be okay if the people who are supposed to be taking care of them are not taking care of them and showing up how they're supposed to.
Absolutely.
And then we're supposed to let go of that and find that within ourselves. So what gets what gets in the way of a child naturally health in a healthy way, leaving those transitional objects behind and finding that inner okayness within themselves? What gets in the way?
I think, and I'm going to be very, I'm going to apologize for almost saying this, because I never like to put too much on parents, because every parent, and being a parent myself, is doing the best that they can, right? And I always feel a big insight I had about my own parents at a certain stage was that we gifted the perfect parents for our soul journey. Because if your parent doesn't give you something which you felt you need, it's because you had to find it within yourself.
Oh
And
wow.
they were, and that was why. And so you see after a while that everything that your parents were was perfect for you on your soul journey. And so I want to say that, so I'm just going to say that as a backdrop. But often what happens is that we're learning from the people around us, and that's our parents, and our teachers, our friends, society. And if you're saying to your children, you don't need to be anxious about the outside world, because there is nothing that could give or take away or steal your intrinsic okayness. It's something that's within you. It's intrinsic, it's innate, it's built in. But then you're panicking or upset because someone didn't call you, or constantly, something's going wrong and you're upset about it, and you're kind of playing out what I'd call the opposite kind of paradigm, because
Mm.
that's how the world looks, and we're all grappling with that as humans, like me too. It's confusing to children. You
Yeah.
look like, like you're not okay right now because of that attachment. So, because children are kind of picking up how we are in the world, they're following our cues. So if we're like worrying about the fact that we didn't call somebody back and they might be upset with us, and we now panicking about it, then that's what our child's picking up. Oh, we need people to be happy with us in order to be okay. So they seeing that so much in life. We're telling them stories about how the outside is affecting you, how you need to show up in a way that the outside is happy with you. we're often using that language, we don't even realize it. So I think that that's confusing. And I also do feel that we come into this world with different souls. Some souls come in that are more evolved, that almost have a sense of their intrinsic inner security and okayness. They're just born into the world feeling like they've got this. And there are other souls who come in not feeling like that at all. And that's part of their different, what I'd call tikkun, or their different journey, is that they've got to figure out, that who they really are and what they have within them. That's part of, that for sure was a lot, and it has and is my journey,
Mm.
because I just feel we're all on different soul journeys. So I think it's a combination of the two, of the
Mhm.
environment that we're in and the journey that we need to go on.
Mm. I'm thinking of the times when what that looks like to the child when we're trying to find the pacifier for them because we know that that's going to make them happy. And in the
Yes.
process, we
Yes.
fall apart or I fall apart because my whole day is run over a stupid pacifier. And then they see, oh, the pacifier was able to ruin mommy's day.
Yeah. Yeah.
So that they pick that up and they learn that's where they learn that it's about the pacifier. It's not about themselves. It's
Very
not
much.
about
And if the mother is very calm in those moments about the pacifier and almost gives them a sense like you're okay. And even if we do look for the pacifier, but you're okay, that's
wow.
giving them a sense of. And by the way, so to give you an example, like my 13-year-old has been going through like a hard time adjusting to high school, a
Mm.
new environment, doesn't feel he really fits in that much. He's quite quirky and different, and he's got five older brothers, and there's a 9-year gap between them. But because
Wow.
he's grown up with all these older brothers, he's quite kind of mature in his thinking. And what I've seen is that adults and older people appreciate some of his quirks and insights and deep thinking in a way that kids don't. And what's interesting is that I could easily move schools. There's an option to move him to a different school. And we've spoken about this a lot. It's a school we were thinking of sending him to because he's got more friends there. It's a better fit for him there. And it maybe is the right school for him. But there's a big part of me and what I've inculcated in him, that if he can find the resources, these resources I'm speaking about, this sense of inner okayness and all the resources within him in this uncomfortable environment, which is challenging. The kids are giving him a hard time. He's what they call, they diss him or tease him a bit or
Wow.
etc. He says that when he's himself, he gets teased, and when he suppresses his personality, then it's okay. And he's trying to find the balance between the two. And
You
he's
sound
really
so
trying to find.
wise.
But he really appreciates the fact that if he can find that inner okayness in this environment, that's going to really serve him for life. So that's what we keep trying to. And even though as a parent or as a person, you want to take him out of that environment into a more comfortable one,
Right.
um, you're thinking, is that really going to be helpful for him? And the great lessons of life that we're trying to, kind of teach each other and help each other with.
So I think almost all of us, even with the most well-meaning parents, are lacking this ability to access that inner okayness and are dependent on some sort of outside thing. Because
Definitely.
I know I have incredible parents. Like I objectively, they're very, very good parents. And yet I left home and outwardly I was okay, but I fell apart inside and I created all of these teddy bears.
Mm-hmm.
So I think probably even with the best of parents, or maybe this was my soul journey as well, maybe there was a combination of that we struggle with that and we haven't been modeled it enough. So
Yeah.
how can we then teach that to ourselves if we haven't been modeled it now that we are on our own to access that even when things outside look like they're unpredictable or falling apart or all of the things that go on.
Yeah. Well, one of the things is that a person needs to first actually start to recognize that those moments in their life that they truly felt okay inside. And that comes in different ways. It could be that we feel a sense of self love. It could be that we felt very connected to people and to others, very present. It could be that we had an incredible amount of clarity. It could be that we had an incredible amount of optimism. Life looked beautiful, or optimistic, or perspective. So there's different ways in which this kind of okayness manifests for people at different times. But if we can think back to those moments, And if we can really deeply think into why they occurred for us, because often at the times when they're happening, we misattributing it to the teddy bear. So we're saying, oh, it's because I was in a great school or something, or I had lots of friends, or it was because I was on holiday, or in, that kind of environment, or it's because this happened to me. So that's the misattribution. We're not owning it. We're not claiming it. We're not claiming that power and saying that was us. That was us feeling something that naturally was within us and just arose, right? We and you can often see that if you put yourself into that, like for example, a lot of people will say, yeah, well, when I go on holiday to Cape Town, you then I feel incredible. But there've been moments that they've been on holiday in Cape Town, they have not felt incredible. They felt upset, something's been on their mind, they've wished they were somewhere else, they felt depressed. It's not the holiday, it's something within them. So if we start to really recognize and own that these deeper feelings of, that we kind of looking for are within us, that's the starting point. And you've got to start to recognize them, because they're not there all the time. They get covered quite quickly, but you get glimpses of them. That was something, by the way, in my kind of recovery period at the age of 29. I started to notice just the small moments where I would feel okay. And usually I didn't have eyes for those at all. I wasn't interested in them. I'd miss them because I was feeling so bad a lot of, especially that period. But I started to actually go, wow, like how's it possible that I'm supposed to be in a depression, but I had 5 minutes this morning where I was laughing and felt hopeful. Like where did that come from, right? And by the way, these qualities, which I see as spiritual qualities, are essential. They're not just nice qualities to have. They're essential for life, because if you think about it, if we can't feel unconditionally or intrinsically hopeful, for example, why would we feel hopeful? When you look around in life, if hope is dependent on life, you look around in life, we'd all, we'd all feel incredibly despairing and hopeless. The only
Mm.
reason you can feel hopeful is because it's an intrinsic spiritual feeling that is unconditional, that is not dependent on circumstances. And that's true for all these different things. Why would you feel the feeling of self-love or self-worth? There's so many areas that we fail and we do wrong and we let ourselves down and we react, etc. But there's a deep sense of love, which is the soul loving itself, loving something that's godly within us, and that kind of naturally. So these feelings are not just kind of zenny, nice feelings. They are
Mm.
absolutely essential for human beings to thrive and to strive. So the first thing is recognizing the truth of that, and that's something we teach and help people a lot with. The second is, and by the way, it's one of the reasons why people love to meditate, because when they meditate, they're trying to quieten their minds down so that they feel what's within their minds, what's intrinsic. They're feeling their essence. They're feeling something that's there. Because when our minds quieten down, we feel what's underneath it, underneath all the noise of our minds. So the more we start to recognize that that's who we are at our essence, that's the first point. The second
So
point is
if I
that,
could just sum up the
sure,
first bit to make
sure.
sure I understood it. Do you mean that to find those moments where we felt okay, and instead of trying to like recreate the external environment that we had attributed to feeling okay, to pinpointing the internal experience that was going on?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying?
Once you start to recognize it's not the outside, there's only one thing it can be, the inside. And what it's doing is it's not even about recreating it. It's just about your mind understanding that I felt something that was intrinsic within me. I felt something, there's this poem that I often like to quote. It's attributed to a French existential philosopher, Nobel laureate winner Albert Camus. And it describes for me what I fell into in those 6 weeks that I spoke about at the age of 29. And it goes, in the midst of chaos, I found within me an invincible peace. In the midst of hate, I found within me an invincible love. In the midst of tears, I found within me an invincible smile. In the midst of winter, I found within me an invincible summer. And that made me happy, because it meant that however hard life pushed at me, there was something within me that was stronger, that was more powerful, that could push right back. So what
Wow.
Albert Camus was pointing to was this intrinsic, what we're calling okayness, this invincible summer that is within us always. And there have been so many people throughout time that have pointed us to it. and shown us that everything we're looking for, this kind of eternal peace, this eternal sense of okayness or love or connection, we're looking for love from the outside world. We're looking for someone to give us love. We're looking for someone to give us, but love is something that we find within us. Love is something that is an innate quality. And when we recognize those times that we have felt a true sense of feeling loved, it's really because we've touched something within us, but we think somebody's given it to us and now we expect the world to give it to us. So it's really challenging that and thinking about those moments and thinking, well, if it was that person that gave it to me in that moment, that sense of love, how come there have been so many other moments I was with that person and they didn't give it to me? Like it didn't happen. And then you realize, okay, there was something I touched within myself. So it's just understanding that. It's almost from a knowledge point of view, starting to understand that as a basis. And on the flip side, what you start to see is that when you don't recognize that, which most of us don't, we all travel what I call on the on track and off track roads. And the on track road is where we're in our well being, we feel secure, we feel like, not that life can't touch us, but we feel like we have what we need. We feel confident we have the resources for life. And on the off track road is where we have these, what I call attachments. We feel like, for example, I need people to appreciate and like me in order to feel okay. And there we have a lot of thinking on our mind, and therefore thinking creates feeling, a lot of feeling. And we're grappling with life and struggling. But the off track road is where we learn. It's where all the rich learning of life takes place. I always say to people, the aim is not to be in our well being all the time because, it's the grappling with life where we do all our rich learning. It's where we're confronting our deepest insecurities. It's what I call the hero's journey. That's where we ultimately, throughout our life, are going on this great adventure. It's what Joseph Campbell called the call to adventure on the hero's journey. And when we go on the road of trial and tribulations, and we're forced to uncover more of these intrinsic resources. But we need to challenge our core beliefs, which are these attachments. Is it true that I can only be okay if this person likes and appreciates me? And we want to challenge that. And the mind, our subconscious mind, really does believe it's true. It's believing that since we're 6 years old. It's almost on autopilot believes that. So in a lot of the exercises we do in our resilience framework are designed to challenge the logic of that. To actually, it's almost like retraining, almost like you teach a child. And a child who believes something and you're trying to teach them that that's not true. And as anybody will know when they become a parent, a child is not going to change their behavior unless what you tell them makes more sense than what they're doing at that time. So, when I was trying to get my kids to do their beds in the morning, there was two that never did their beds. And when I kind of got down to asking them why, they said, well, why should we do our beds? Because no one's going to see our bedroom but us. We the ones who are going to see it when we come back from school, and no one comes in it. So, and we don't mind it. So I, as a
Fair
parent,
point.
had to think, can I trump that logic? Because unless I can come up with something that makes more sense to them, they're not going to change and that's the way it works. So unless we can almost retrain and educate our subconscious, that's not true. Because our subconscious is trying to protect us. So it feels like, oh, I've got to get that person to like me. Otherwise, I'm not going to feel okay. And so it's got all these strategies to try and make sure that everybody likes us. And it's not going to let go of those because it's trying to protect us and keep us safe. That's its job. So unless we can re-educate it that we are safe, that we're okay, that we don't need that person, it would be lovely if they did like us, but we don't need them to like us in order to feel okay. And we've got to actually be able to show them the logic and the truth of that. So we've got a whole lot of questions, deep questions, to help facilitate that. It's almost like for the first time, instead of just taking on a belief, we almost just take them on unchecked. We don't challenge them as if they're truth. At least they're like Torah Messina. We actually stepping back and starting to challenge something and say, like, I know it looks this way to me and to you, but what happens if it isn't? And what we call like almost poking holes in something. If you poke holes in something and it looks even a little bit less true, you're going to see that you have a little more space. The next time someone's not so happy with you, you'll feel a little more secure around it. You might have a few more kind of thoughts about, oh, I don't know if they're happy, but you won't feel as insecure because you've poked some holes. So it's going to these core beliefs and it's actually starting to challenge them, um, not just kind of take them as.
Yeah, because when I look back at the times mostly that I've been okay, usually things are going well on the outside. It
Yeah,
usually does. check itself out that when life hits you really hard, then you're not okay. When things are going well, then you're okay. So what I would see it almost as, okay, so I have this inner okayness, but there are certain things that help me access that inner okayness and certain things that block that inner okayness.
So I want to say to you, nothing can give you inner okayness or take it away. Nothing can increase it or decrease it. So what you're describing for me is what we call attached positive feelings. And this is quite a challenge to people who've assumed that when you're feeling okay, you're doing okay. Because we assume that when we're feeling good, we're doing good. That must be, but a lot of the time that we're feeling good, it's because of something. So if that something changes, or
Yeah.
falls away, then we plummet. So that is a false sense of doing okay. It's not, because
Oh,
an
so it
inner
went
sense of being
really.
okay is unconditional and stable. It's like when that thing is there, that, great, our kids are behaving, or our classes are going well, or our friends are liking us. And then if that switches, we still feel stable and okay because it's coming from an unconditional place within us. But when it is conditional or dependent on something, we call that attached positive feelings. Those feelings are only there because of that something. And when that something goes away, the feeling goes away. That's not what I'm talking about, that deeper sense of intrinsic well being.
Oh,
So
I'm glad you
it's a
clarified
great,
that.
I'm glad you asked that question because
It
it's such an.
comes with that fear at the same time. You know,
Totally.
it's like when the cousins are all together and it's like, this is so fun. Oh, but everyone's going to leave. Or like camp is, I remember like the moment I started camp, it's so fun, but it's only 30 days and it's like almost going to end. You have that fear happening at the same time.
There's that kind of, even if it's in the peripheral, kind of in the rear view
That
mirror, there's that little bit of
uneasiness.
insecurity and unease and disease, if we're really
Right.
honest about it. Where this other sense is not, it feels so foundational. The thing that I wanted to say to you, Esther, is that we're not taught how to get in touch with and connect to our internal worlds because we're so busy building our external worlds. And by the way, all the analytical thinking we do about ourselves is not building our internal world. That's just thinking about our external world. How can we be better so we're more liked? How can we look better or do better or fit in, or why is life not working out for us? It's all about the external. We're so cut off from getting to know our internal worlds and getting to know this deep sense of true self, where these deeper feelings lie, that it becomes almost foreign to us. And it's almost like it's a new kind of paradigm for us to see, how do we connect to it? How do we see that everything, and it sounds almost like a cliche, but it's everything that we're looking for from the outside, we already have in the inside. It's just that it's,
Yeah.
you know,
So this exercise you gave, what if somebody says, I don't know if I've ever felt that before. Like I felt good, but it was always attached positivity. And
yeah.
they say, I don't even know what that looks like.
So almost every human being has had moments of their, because when your mind's distracted almost from yourself and all your worries and your insecurities, which our minds do get distracted for a moment. We're just with somebody in their company, we feel so comfortable, we're laughing. That's when our kind of natural well-being comes to the surface. It's almost like a metaphor. If you think about, you're in a swimming pool and you're pushing a ball down in the swimming pool. It takes quite a lot of effort, and then you kind of like, somebody calls you and you let it go and it bounces to the surface. Our well-being is so buoyant because it's our true essence, it's who we really are, that it comes to the surface, when we're almost not concentrating or working in our minds. So some people might need a little bit of a reminder because it doesn't feel so familiar to them, and especially those of us who have, and by the way, I haven't met a human being, and I've been working with many incredible people for 20 years who doesn't have many of what I call these attachments, which are, these adult teddy bears. We all do, and
Yeah.
we'll all have them until the day we die, but our job is not to get rid of them because we're humans. We're always going to have to some extent, but it's to weaken them and to find more of the inner security. It's a directional, we spiritually trying to evolve so that we feel like the locus of power, and I don't mean an egotistical power, I mean a sense of psychological and spiritual power, that we're finding more of it inside and outsourcing less of it to the outside world. But I think that you can remind people of who they are. Everybody has touched who they are at different points and different times, and sometimes they have to go back to their childhood to kind of remember the times that they felt carefree. And sometimes even when you're working with people, if you're very present and you're very in your well-being with somebody, in your okayness, a person kind of relaxes. And I met with a young boy the other day who has a huge amount of social anxiety and disassociation, and he came in very, very upset and very, he was not in a good state. And by the end of the session, he had just calmed down, and we kind of pointed out to him, my husband and I were meeting with him, like the difference in his energy. He was laughing, he was getting more insightful, he had just calmed down, you know, because often it's often when you're in the presence of somebody whose energy is more kind of calm, what I call this more self energy, it can almost draw out that in another person.
Mm.
So, yeah.
Mm,
But there's
that's
no person who doesn't have moments of that. It just might be that they feel so foreign or few and far between because of how hard we've been working in our minds.
What is disassociation?
So disassociation is just a mechanism of the mind uses to almost numb your feelings. So what happens is that when we don't feel safe as humans, and to me that's because it feels like these threats that we've talked about, these main core attachments are being threatened in some way. Somebody's unhappy with you, or etc., or you feel that you might not do well in school, or etc. So you're almost going to a flat, fight, or freeze response, which we kind of hardwired to do. We were as humans, but that was because there was actually a physical danger in front of us. So we're either going to start to attack somebody, or we're going to start to withdraw, or we're going to freeze. And disassociation is part of that freeze response where it almost feels too much for us. A person gets overwhelmed by their feelings, and so their mind just almost numbs it. It's a strategy of the mind. It's too much for it, and you almost just don't feel anything. And that can be very helpful in certain moments. If it's, for example, when my late sister passed away very suddenly and tragically at the age of 42, I remember her teenage children saying to me at the time when she died, and it was within a 10-day period that she kind of got a diagnosis and died, that was very, very intense. And I remember them saying to me in the days after she died, I don't know what's wrong with me. I feel numb. I don't feel anything. But it was because it was too much for the mind to take in. There was too much pain, and the mind couldn't. So it was a helpful strategy. It was a helpful coping mechanism. But often what happens is that we pick up these in that what's helpful in the moment, we kind of can carry into our lives. So there are people who struggle with feeling almost cut off or disassociated, because as soon as it's almost a protective mechanism. The mind is just trying to suppress negative feelings. But unfortunately, when you suppress negative feelings, you suppress all feelings. So they kind of just feel quite disassociated and cut off.
Mm.
Yeah.
So that would definitely make accessing that inner experience, which is one of a lot of. Is it a feeling? Is what you this inner okayness a feeling, or is it something else?
So it's both, and I'm glad that you asked that, because it's both. It's deeper feelings, and how those deeper feelings manifest are love. We feel a deep sense of love, and that can be self-love, but then it can be love towards God, if people are that way orientated, love towards other people around them. It's just a feeling of love that kind of almost shows up in us. It's a deep feeling of connection. We feel deeply connected to ourselves, to life, to nature, feeling of peace and calm, feeling of gratitude, deep feeling, and we feel grateful, not because of anything, not because we've got just, it's a feeling of gratefulness. These are the deeper feelings that people will connect to and talk about when they touch this place of inner okayness. But it's also what I call qualities or attributes, such as a clarity of mind. You just know what to do. You feel your mind feels very clear. You feel very naturally motivated. You feel intrinsically motivated. You feel energized. You feel naturally confident. And again, it's not because of anything. You feel naturally confident. You feel optimistic. You feel optimistic, you feel hopeful, and not again because of anything. That's the attached positive feeling. I'm optimistic because I've got this about to happen, and I think I'm going to be. It's just a feeling of optimism. You're very adaptable. You're not rigid. You feel very adaptable, very creative. You're proactive. So it's just these natural kind of qualities and resources that we actually need to navigate life and the challenges that come our way. Because if you've got a big challenge in your life, what do we need? We need calm. We need a feeling of self-love or self-worth. We want to feel connected to what we're dealing with. We want to feel that we've got the clarity to know how to deal with it. We want to feel we can be agile and adaptable, kind of change our minds, shift, see how it needs to be dealt with. We want to feel confident enough that we have what we need to deal with it and naturally energized. So these are all kind of the qualities and resources that I'm kind of wrapping up into this inner okayness that we actually need for life and what life kind of brings to us.
So you felt that feeling of all those things you described after you came out of the hospital, you
Yeah,
said for about 6 weeks.
yeah,
Okay, so here's my question.
yeah, sure.
Are you able to experience that without suffering a lot first? Or do we first
Definitely.
have to like hit rock bottom?
Yeah, definitely, for sure. I mean, I have some, children who walk around, specifically like two, I'd say, of my sons naturally in that state most of the time. They just don't have a lot of attachments. There were some of those souls who grew up with that, and they just naturally feel confident, energized, optimistic. Not There's very little that gets to them. It's not that nothing. I mean, one of them at the moment, maybe when he grows older, he's 22 now, but I'm sure something will, because life brings us these things that are outside of that does happen. But they just naturally operate from that space. There are a lot of people who just have less of these adult teddy bears and are more connected to, um, you know, and the good thing is that for those who it doesn't feel as natural and intrinsic. You see, I used to think it didn't feel that way to me because of my personality. I thought I had an A-type personality, a more intense personality. I thought it was also because of my past. I had a more difficult past. So I kind of felt like I just was in that category who this kind of what I called being an easygoing person, or a naturally content person. Feeling of natural contentment was just for other people wasn't my domain. But it wasn't true. I just recognized that some souls just need more learning. I needed more education. I had more misunderstandings, and I had stronger beliefs. These core beliefs that my okayness was attached to were just, creating a lot more thinking and a lot more conditions on my well-being. So I've just needed a lot more learning. So some of us just need the learning, but if you see that learning as beautiful, it's exciting, it's spiritual, it's something that's evolving you, it's not a drag. It's not like, oh, I was given the short stick. It's like, wow, all this beautiful learning I get to do as a human. But for sure, for sure, for sure, you don't need to struggle at all. There are many people in my lives, friends, family, and as I say, my own kids who, they're just naturally walking around with a lot of this well-being.
So the way to get to the well-being is just to take off the stuff that's covering it, and then it's just there.
Yeah. And that's the beautiful thing. It's not something that we have to fix. We're not
Mm.
broken. And it's not something we have to add on. It's not like an add-on. It's something that's already there. It's almost what I call mining. You're mining for something that's already there. It's already built in, which is beautiful. So it's just an uncovering. It's almost like an unlearning. It's an
It's an
uncovering.
unlearning.
Yeah, yeah.
It's easy. Is it easier to unlearn things or to learn things? I'm not sure.
Yeah, I probably unlearning, just because
Yeah,
we're not as used to that. It's almost a little bit counterintuitive to us, because
right.
also once something looks true to us, we almost just take it as a truth, and it becomes almost embedded in our minds as a truth. And so now to challenge that and to let go of that
It's hard.
is quite big for us as humans. It takes a lot of humility and a lot of openness, to really kind of look at something that our minds have grasped as being necessary.
So if a girl's listening to this and she says, I want to access this, what would step one be? Where can she start to be able to start to access this inner well-being, this inner okayness?
You're saying just independently on her own?
Completely, she's by herself. She doesn't feel like she has a lot of resources. Life feels really chaotic. I'm thinking also about there was just a fire in a seminary. I don't know if you heard in Yerushalayim.
No.
They lost all their stuff. Some of the girls thought they were going to die. Now they're by themselves here. I'm just thinking
Wow.
about them. Like, and
Wow.
you're telling her, like, oh, but you have this inner okayness within you, right? Like, and she's probably be like, I don't know where it is. Where
Yeah.
would you advise her to start?
Yeah. Well, as I said before, I think the first step is that you have to be able to look into yourself and actually challenge and question, like the moments. Ask yourself, what happened to me when, there were lots of missing pieces, of course, in our short time together I didn't talk about. But one of the things that, when that happened to me, that transformative moment, is that I realized that I had a very, as most of us humans do, a very strong rational mind that had a lot of justifications and rationalizations. We've thought about things, right? And so, but that mind, even though it had a lot of self-awareness in it, um, had brought me to the lowest point of my life, where I'd almost lost my life. And so I actually thought, well, I don't know how much confidence I have in you. You seem very smart. You've got the answers to everything. If you ask you, well, why do you struggle? Because of X, Y, and Z. And why is this so difficult? You've got all the
Mm,
answers, but yet you kind of almost lost your life. And so what happened is I kind of fired my mind. I said that I'm not interested in you anymore. So when it gave me an answer, I was like, no, not listening. And it almost created more space. And I felt like I went back to being a baby who's almost learning how to walk and talk. So I had this open mind. So instead of saying, well, why do you get so extreme? Or why do you get so frightened? Well, I got so frightened because there's a fire. Or I got so frightened because I'm so extreme because of the X, Y. It was just a question mark. It was just an openness. And when the mind's open, then what starts to happen is that there's space for new thinking. There's space for insight to come. And so
mm,
it's just about challenging some of our, one of my sons said to me the other day, he's been struggling a bit, and he said to me, I don't think I'm going to be content until I find meaning. I need to find my meaning and my purpose. And until I find my meaning and purpose, I can be content. And that sounds pretty reasonable, right? When I find my meaning and purpose, everyone's looking. Viktor Frankl talks about meaning, purpose. And I said to him,
right.
who says? Like, you've just created that now. And so now you've just put a condition on your okayness that you can't be okay until you find something that's your meaning and purpose. Well, who said? And for him, it was just a truth. And when you create these kind of beliefs that put a condition on your okayness, all your thinking's going to, there's going to be like a flood of thinking that's going to back that up. You're going to be
Mm,
looking for it, you're going to be telling yourself it, etc. So, one of the first steps is to really kind of challenge our own thinking and our own minds and what we've thought until this point has been true, if it's not serving us. If it
it's
hasn't
not
been
so
serving us,
fast.
if we feel enlightened and we feel happy, but if we don't feel we have all the answers, it's to really start to challenge and to just kind of have more of an open mind so that we can kind of new thinking and new insight can come in. That's
Mm,
one of the
yeah.
first things I'd say.
Because I'm thinking about these girls, even I've heard a lot of people react to it because the whole Israel heard about it. It was on the radio. Like their semio was ruined. That's
Yeah,
kind of, and
yeah,
that's just a thought. That's
yeah.
just a belief.
Totally,
Who
totally, totally.
said?
Totally. Do you know, I have it was a colleague of mine at one stage. We've been out of touch now. But when the really, really bad earthquakes were happening in Nepal, they caused devastation around her. She had this incredible, that's how we came to know each other. She's Nepalese, and she had the most incredible, as the buildings were falling around her, she had the most incredible insight of her own inner well being. And she felt this incredible sense of calmness, and then out of that, she knew exactly what to do to keep her family safe, etc. And it was such a pivotal moment of insight where everything was crumbling around her, and she saw and touched this part of her that is deeply, deeply okay no matter what. Now, obviously, that's a very deep and, kind of unusual. Not all of us have that in that moment. But people, by the way, do say that in moments of extreme kind of chaos, and that this is known in trauma, people actually get this clarity and feel fine. And it's afterwards when they think back on it, their mind starts to panic and think about all the things that could have gone wrong. But that's also
That's
because their
interesting.
minds just almost can't think about all the adult teddy bears. So they quieten down and they touch this place of well being and they feel this calm and have this clarity. So I think it's just, really, and by the way, this is a Torah and a spiritual and a kind of belief. It's not something that's just made up. This is that we have a soul, we have a piece of God in us, a chelek Eloka mimal, and that is not limited in any way. And when we touch into that, I mean, there's just infinite worlds of riches and wisdom that we're touching into. And so, part of us is going to have to not only challenge our own beliefs, but challenge the beliefs of society as well, as you say, who's backing up our beliefs. And
Right.
really say, is that true, as you said? Yeah,
Wow. Terry, thank you so much.
yes, so
I want to find this now. I'm like, okay, I'm excited. I'm excited. It makes life more exciting. Like it's possible to feel that way and to access it, and you don't have to, your whole life doesn't have to fall apart in order to access it. But also, it's possible for everyone, and it's within us. It's not, you don't have to become a genius and figure out the solution to life, and or even grow up. We wait till we grow up. A lot of us still
exactly.
waiting.
And the one ending point I'd say to you is that probably the most pivotal point, which we didn't speak to because there's so much to talk about, you
There's
asked
a
some
lot.
great questions, but that is once you've met and you know that you have what you need inside of you, you've touched this well being and you've claimed it as yours, not misattributed it to something outside of yourself, then even when it's covered up, it doesn't matter because you know it's within you. You know it's
Mm.
within you. You know nothing can diminish it, take it away, scar it, hurt it, steal it from you. You know the reason you're not feeling it is only because it's covered up by insecure thinking, which we're going to be working on for the rest of our lives. But you know that it's within you. It's not missing. It's not in any way lacking. That's what gives a person what I call the resilience to go through life, even when they're not accessing it. And that is even more important for me in a way than accessing it. It's
Mm.
understanding that it's there, and
Mm.
because that's what gives you almost a different perspective about the struggle when you're in it. You're going through the struggle, but you understand that you have what you need within you. Yes, it's covered up, but that clarity, some of those deeper feelings are within me. It's just that I can't right now access it. So you start to feel okay even when you're not okay. You feel okay even when you're kind of not okay. And that's an incredible kind of gift.
That's a huge gift. I feel like you're a huge gift to the world. So thank you for giving us the gift of coming and sharing your wisdom and keep on doing the amazing work that you're doing.
Thank you. So thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of On Your Own. If you like this episode or think it will be useful to someone else, please leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. I would love to connect with you. If you've got any questions, feedback, or ideas for future episodes, you can email me at onyourownpodcast@gmail.com. See you next week, and in the meantime, happy adulting.